Crazy with the followers.
We'll see how it goes, man. Let's get it going.
Que Padre.
All right. What's up, everybody? For those of you that are joining us, this is a new episode we're doing today. We're trying some new technology. We are connected on Instagram Live via loopholes and stuff. So hopefully you guys can see everything. Thank you for joining us. This is Que Padre, Que Padre podcast, a podcast about Latino fatherhood in general, mental health, relationships, and everything in between. My name is Froy. You guys know my boy here, Chris.
What's up?
So today we are going to talk about some interesting topics. If you do or do not know, it is Men's Mental Health Month. So we are going to be talking about men's mental health. And we are also going to be talking about time. And what I mean by that is the time that we dedicate to our friends, to our family, to ourselves, to our relationships, just the time. Where do we find it? Where does it go? Right? But before we get there, we do have a special sponsor today. And our sponsor for today's podcast is LB Deuce Production Videography. LB Deuce Production specializes in weddings, quinceañeras, sweet 16s, and graduations. Our goal is to capture people's memorable moments to keep for a lifetime. Contact us for your next event. There's a number right there if you guys want to catch that. Hit up my boy Deuce. The Instagram page, you guys can check it out. It says right there, LB Deuce Production. Give him a follow. It does great work. Give him a follow and at least check out the videos. Really cool stuff. I'm thankful that he was able to kind of sponsor us for this month. So thank you, Deuce. We'll post that information on Instagram for everybody to share, and we'll tag him so that you guys know what's up. But today we also have a special guest. So since we're talking about mental health, what better than to have a professional in the field that can correct us and keep us honest with everybody. So without further ado, I'm introducing you to my friend Jess.
Hi, guys.
So Jessica, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody here?
My name is Jessica Pina. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So I just think with everybody here, I'm like, is it just us, right?
It's just us. You can act like it's just us.
Yeah.
We're just gonna have a conversation.
Yeah, that helps.
So thank you for joining us. It's gonna be pretty interesting and pretty cool to have, I guess, a female perspective. Because Chris and I usually just talk about ourselves. We're kind of the things that we go through. But it is Men's Mental Health Month, and I think one of the things that I guess I'd like to ask Jess, just on the fly. Remember, none of this is scripted. Everybody out there, she joined us last minute. She was able to take some time away from what she was doing on her busy day to join us and humor us a bit. But what has been your experience with Latino mental health? Like Latinos, I guess specifically Latino men. Like, do you see like a growth in men seeking for help, or do you think that there's a lot of room for men to get more help, or what do you think? At least in your experience.
Yeah, definitely a lot more room for growth. So I do want to start by commending you guys for making this space, to talk and just get real and talk about issues that are pertaining to you. I think that's the first step, right? Because I know that the ways that men are socialized, like that's not encouraged or promoted. So I think you guys just making this space is already like, I know this sounds drastic, but it is revolutionary. It's already like fighting back.
Yeah.
So right now that I'm working at a group private practice, I do have clients that are men, that are fathers. I'm like thinking, how many have I had that are Latinos? I think one and a half. and he was
Wow.
half Latino. But in the past, when I worked, because I worked at hospitals, and then community agencies, and that's where I worked with a lot of the Latino population, particularly with the kiddos. And so I think I'd have to make a lot of effort to. The mom was the one that was always involved, bringing them to the appointments, and so rarely would I see the dads involved. But I know that it was ongoing efforts with my colleagues and the agency to try and encourage the fathers to join and be part of like the conversation about their kids, and what the kids were going through, either via just like inviting them for family sessions or starting like men's groups and stuff. So I think, like, let me backtrack your question. I'm not, we need to do more, essentially.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that it's really going to come from like spaces like this and men talking to men, like, and then my mind goes to thinking about my family, and like them seeing me as a therapist. And sometimes when I speak, they're like, what are you talking about?
And we get into it. We've talked about our families, right? Like this is, we've been doing this for, man, 2 years almost, just like the talks, right?
We do it once a month. We're on our second year. Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So it's been pretty good. Like we'll have days and conversations that just like, man, we get deep, and like we're getting into some real stuff. Sometimes obviously we kind of stay superficial, not because we don't want to share, but I think it's that's where we feel safe, I guess. We don't really want to get too into the weeds for whatever reason. But we've been trying to kind of incorporate our experiences.
We're about to get vulnerable.
Oh, yeah, definitely, definitely. There might be a little tear here and there. We've gone there. But we've talked about loss. We've talked about separation. We've talked about insecurities. We've talked about different thoughts and relationships, and we got into it, right? And so I was actually talking to Chris about this other day. There's another page that I follow that a bunch of people follow. It's called The Tired Dad. It's a great page, but I feel like it's all very, very melodramatic. Like all the posts are very like slow and like thoughtful, and it's like, man,
you gotta remember that all those are just they're grabbers, bro. So
see, but still, like I identify, but it's like I don't want to think about these times as like they're fleeting, and yes, I want to take advantage of them, and man, I'm gonna sit here and be a little bit sad and about it. Like, nah, you know what? You're right. The time's flying by. Let me go and play with my kids. Let me take a moment, right? And then let me enjoy the time that I'm gonna be spending with my kids, right? So going back to how we're talking about our mental health and our thoughts here, I want to like make the space not like a depressing space, but like a space where we can talk about it and we can joke about it and we can be open about it, but we don't have to necessarily cry. And maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. But I mean, if you think about like a lot of the way that Latino men grew up, there's no llore cabrón, right? Hey, why are you crying, right? So it's not necessarily that I don't want to cry. It's just I prefer not to if I don't have to.
That's interesting.
You know what I mean? Like I prefer not to if I don't have to, because even though I know it doesn't necessarily show weakness, like in the back of my mind, you think about when you were growing up. ¿Por qué estás llorando? ¿No te hicimos nada?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
well,
so
it's hard. Right? It's probably unfamiliar.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's kind of what I was thinking of, like whenever I try to share something or try to make a video for whatever, like I want to make it real, but I'm not trying to make it sad. If that makes any sense.
So Joey on IG says, let's talk about not saying I love you a lot.
All right. So let's talk about it.
I don't know what he's talking about. I always tell my friends I love
Hey,
him. So,
yeah. Maybe you should talk about it, Joey, because I say it all the time.
I tell Froy all the time.
Yeah,
You know?
I text Chris at 3 in the morning. Yeah, let him
Wow.
think. Yeah, right. Yeah, but you know what? But it
So
might be hard.
He's saying why is it so hard for some of us?
So
No, well,
here's my
you know
thought.
what?
Okay, what's your thought, Chris? What's
We
your
already
thought?
know what we know because it's not the first time we speak about this. From your experience, Jess, what and from what you see with smaller children, because I see it as well with nephews, nieces, and even sometimes our kids, right? Why is it so hard for them to uh not so much say the word I love you, but actually mean it. You know what I mean?
I think it's for probably similar reasons to what Freud was saying, that it's difficult to cry. Right. I think men are not and that's mental health, right? I was like writing some notes down because like, what am I talking about? What are you guys talking about? Like, oh yeah, mental health. Let me try and define it here. But it's like
So,
it's all
no,
emotions, right? And
sorry,
your
real
mental
quick.
health. Huh?
FYI, we go sometimes
Wait,
very straight,
We'll
and then
start
we go
here,
left, right,
and then we'll
then
end
I
up over
mean,
here.
it's
It's
it
no.
okay.
works perfect with my ADD brain.
Yeah,
So
so
right there
just
was
hold on for the
You're fine.
ride. Yeah.
Yeah, we're
so yeah.
good. Well, somebody somewhere will pull it back. Like, oh, anyway. So
Oh
what
yeah,
we were saying is,
exactly.
if we go somewhere, don't worry about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's for the same reasons, right? Like not like where do men learn about being a man, right? Like their fathers, their grandfathers, the men around them, society, and women too, because I think women also perpetuate these same beliefs and norms and the things that we're teaching our boys, right? And so I think um, it's probably hard to say I love you, or you don't hear it as often for the same reasons that Freud has a hard time crying, or chooses not to. It's like what the messaging that we're getting or that boys are getting and that we as women are also partaking in and sending that, right? Is like toughen up. Like como lo que estabas diciendo, right? Like no llores, cabrón, or like
Yep.
no seas blah, and then enter homophobia too, right? Because that's another intersection there.
Mm.
And so like let's define masculinity, right? And it's frequently defined as a lack of love, essentially, right? I know that sounds like very general and also like extreme, but that's essentially what it is. Yeah, ouch. Yeah. um because saying I love you, showing emotion, being vulnerable, tearing up, like that's such a human experience that then we're depriving our boys of doing, and so they suppress it, and then they it has to come out somewhere, so it usually tends to go to anger, violence, or this or that. So yeah, I think it's along the same thread
Yeah.
of to answer that question.
So
Yeah.
how do we balance? For example, I have a 13-year-old, right? And sometimes there's certain things that he says that I know that I didn't teach him or he didn't hear it from me, but that I know that it's natural for his age to at least use because of his the kids that he hangs around in school, obviously the stuff that he sees, the fact that maybe a certain topic hasn't come up in conversations. How can we balance um, being manly because obviously we need men. I also need him to know one day how to change a tire or how to do certain plumbing things or how to be the man of the house, right? But at the same time, understanding that it's okay to share his feelings with his best friend, his girlfriend or wife later on in the future, his father or his mother, how do we balance that as us that some of us maybe were not taught to express our feelings but now have learned to, or some of us that actually don't at all?
Right,
Yeah.
or learning, right? I think that's a really good question, and there's like probably a twofold that I'd like to say. But I think first and foremost, like creating a space, a safe space in your home for the ability for your kiddos to be authentic, and not be rejected for being authentic, right? So if they're showing
Right.
emotion, if they're being tearful, if they're just expressing hurt and pain, that you welcome that and you create that space. Because guess what, they're going to have to put a mask on, right? They're going to have to walk out the door, and they're going to have to, you know, like you said, quote unquote, be a man, right? Whatever that means. That's the other twofold. Like, let's
Yeah,
define
I was
that,
gonna say
right?
something on that too.
Yeah, like what does that mean? And then we can kind of break that down. But yeah, essentially you want your kiddos to have a space. I think as a therapist, sometimes, especially working with young kids and boys, the therapy became that space because they didn't have it at home, right? And so that took a while, but that's at the beginning. At the very basic level, do they have a place, a space for them to be able to kind of be that and be vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
Because of course you also gotta, unfortunately, in the society that we live in, arm them, you know, and kind of protect them, I think, too, from like what they're going to get on the outside. But then for
Yeah.
them to know that that's not, you don't have to internalize that.
And
Right.
I think
know?
we do that a lot as men. We internalize a lot,
Absolutely.
and it goes back to, you know, we don't want to show that emotion because it shows a weakness or whatever.
I
Um,
Okay.
yeah, as I say, and to the point you were saying, Chris, you know, teaching our son to be a man or whatever. I think to every man,
Well, like I said,
the
being a man, but with what we're doing, right? With what
yeah,
you and I are doing is balancing it out, you know.
yeah,
But how is it? How are you too much of a man or not man enough? Not to us, because obviously we're practicing it, but to for him or for her, whatever it is, uh, for them to be comfortable in it being man enough or it being I guess sociably enough to share their feelings. You know what I mean?
but I think you're I think and I'm guessing, but there's a threshold that you have in your mind already of what a man should be. So like
That's what I'm saying.
yeah,
But
you know what I mean?
that's
Like, but
myself.
that's
That's
yourself. But
myself.
are you putting that threshold on your son too? Like, is he supposed to measure up to that same manhood?
Well,
Like,
no, that's why I
if you
asked
don't
the question.
if you don't know how to change a tire, does that make you less of a man?
Well, no, but I'm
No,
saying it's
that's
an
what I'm saying.
example. You know, it's an
Yeah,
example, and I guess
Right.
it's one of the first things that us as boys, at least the boys from my parents, that's one of the first things that my dad taught us. Is,
yeah.
but not so much of it because he taught my sister as well, but more than anything, just as a survival type in case of whatever,
Like a protector.
right, right.
Yeah.
There's a podcast
But it's
actually.
but people, and not and I won't say people, I'll say women. Some people say, well, you're supposed to do it because you're the man, you know.
There's a podcast called Man Enough. Really popular, famous. The He's an actor, advocate. And he wrote a book. It's called Man Enough as well. And they were interviewing someone, and I unfortunately don't remember who it was or whatever. But he's like, I remember the first time. This is him. Don't quote me on it. But essentially, I remember the first time that I knew what it was to be like a man, right? And he said, I came home. I was 7 years old, and his uncle, who always used to like hug him and um, give him love and show him love and things like that. He walked in and he's like, hey, didn't give him a hug that day and said, you're the man of the house. I think maybe his dad had passed away or something like that. And so this was like his father figure. I think if
Yeah,
I didn't hear the whole interview, but essentially he says like, you're the man of the house now. Like it's your job. And so he shared in this interview that the next day he went to school and he stopped listening to his teachers because he's like, oh, I'm the man of the house now, like I don't got to listen to you. And then he gets in trouble, right? And now his mom is scolding him. And it's like these confusing messages that we're sending kiddos, right? Like boys of like, toughen up, don't do this, don't do that. They're children, right?
Yeah.
Like children are so vulnerable. Children do not have control. They have very
Hmm.
little control. They're so dependent. And so if you're telling a kid like you got to be the man of the house, you got to do this, you got to protect, like we're already drilling these messages, right? And it's
And
so
the fact
different
that
than
they
the way
take it
that,
very literal, so
huh,
they
They
take
take
it
it
very
literal.
literal, the
they
actual
internalize it,
term.
right?
Yeah.
Like all children. And so children, the way that they internalize messaging, so it's like if dad leaves, oh, he probably left because I did something wrong. Or if he leaves and doesn't come back, oh, it's because why wasn't I good enough for him? Why doesn't he love me? Right? And so when they internalize it that way, what gives them a sense of control is that, okay, well, if I think it's about me, why he left, that let me do this or let me do that to make him come back.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And so begins this like, if I could just be good enough, if I could just do this, if I would just do that, or maybe if I do this, and everything is, it's like scarcity mindset, right? You're not whole, you're not complete, you're not being taught that you're, but it's like that's kiddos. That's how. So it's and I digressed a little, but um, that's how children don't have the capacity to think about
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
concepts like this,
And
right?
it's more of a case by case too, as well, because obviously every person understands completely different. Obviously, depending where they grew up as well. Some kids have to grow up a lot quicker than others, and they learn to understand that. But yeah, you're right. Like by what you were saying, that now, because he understands that he's the man. Now he doesn't have to listen to authority, which he is pretty much misunderstanding the whole concept of now you're taking over of what your dad used to be. uh Took it too literal,
Yeah.
and that's the hard part as far as what I'm saying. How can we balance uh the machismo part with sometimes you do have to be sensitive enough to express yourself or to listen to somebody, because like I was telling Freud not too long ago, um some of us sometimes have a hard time answering back to other people, right? Like we'll get a call or a text, and we won't text back till maybe a couple hours later, or a day later, or two later. And the way I think is, if somebody is calling me or texting me or needing my attention, it's for a reason. You know what I mean? And it could either be the last time that I could relay that information, or I will never get to speak to them again for whatever reasons. And obviously, to me, those balances are very, very important, and very sometimes difficult. Again, because um, the ages, the way I grew up, the way that I'm bringing up my children are completely, completely different. I'm trying to balance the way I think versus the way my father thought, or my uncles, or even my cousins.
Yeah.
And that the way the new generations are thinking too, because I think that there's, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. I
it's
mean,
difficult.
and
A lot of what from what I see is, and I could be wrong, obviously, but the generation to me seems like they just don't care.
that's just because you're getting old.
What do you mean they don't
Me.
care? What do you mean?
Well, yeah, it's always I don't know, even if it's a yes or no question, it's I don't know. It's always an I don't know. I get that a lot, you
From who?
know.
From your kids? Are you talking about your kids?
My kids, my nieces, my nephews, other people's kids. I hear it a lot in the street from other kids. I don't know.
They're indifferent.
Yeah. And to me,
I
it
don't.
just seems like like you just don't care.
I don't know that that equates to not caring, rather than maybe they don't know how to express themselves, right? Because I go back to the same thing. Like,
Shit, you're
if
right.
Well,
it's hard
yeah,
for you guys,
but again,
like to talk
I'm,
about shit, imagine a freaking kid. There's so much input that they're getting to, like at school, with their friends, on social media, on their phones. I feel like a lot of kids don't have a lot of like what is it? Input, output.
Yeah.
right? A lot of output. Like, are they talking about this? Probably not. Are they like, where are they releasing some of the things that they're receiving? Where are they processing and things like that? Exactly, right? Video games, disassociating, like just disconnecting from the world. So yeah, you ask them questions like, what? I don't know, like what?
Yeah.
So I don't know that it means that they don't care though, because I think when I've spoken to kiddos, and I worked with a lot of kids before, preteens, especially teenagers. I used to work a long time ago when I started in the field. I worked at a nonprofit in Vista, working with aging out of foster young boys, ages 18 to 21, in a transitional housing home. Um, where was I going with that? I totally lost it. But
A lot of input,
my
not a lot
brain.
of output.
Um, I lost it completely. This
Well,
is
it
Well,
happens.
in those situations, in those situations, how can we change them? Well, not necessarily change them, but prepare them, because life is about questions, and if you don't have the answer, you try to find the answer, right? A lot of times these kids look for us for answers, and I always tell them, just imagine if I was like you, right? You come to me with the question, and I tell you, and I
Yeah,
walk
but
away.
you're an adult, right? Like
Mhm.
your brain is like fully developed, and these kids, you got to
Well,
also.
that's
Oh,
what I'm
that's
saying. But I
probably what
mean,
it was. That
I
when
I remember I remember when I was a teenager. Not only was I not allowed to say but I didn't say it. I didn't say it at all. Either I answered, or I answered wrong, and you'll probably tell me, "Oh, you're an idiot" or whatever. But it was an answer. You know.
I
You
don't
didn't
know which
say, I
one is
don't
more
know.
problematic.
I don't know. Like, to me, it seems that I would rather have a dumb answer than a no answer. You know? To me,
I
it
think what
seems
I was
like
saying earlier
to
is
me
when
at
I've
least it
spoken
seems like
when
you're trying, at least trying to talk, at least trying to answer the question. You know?
but also, right, who are their parents and who's modeling this behavior, this speaking? And I think that that's what maybe where I was going with that earlier. Like, when
Yeah.
I've spoken to kids and made
Two
spaces for
parents.
them and asked questions and showed them like how to express, like they do, and they have really awesome thoughts and ideas and things like that, right? But you got to get them engaged in that type of dialogue, and it's not always safe to do so for whatever reason, or yeah, because like they haven't been taught, they don't have that ability yet because of a number of reasons.
I think Chris, and just listening to Jess talk about, her point of view on this, because I know we kind of touched on this one of the last times we talked, is I don't think that the kids nowadays are careless or they don't care. I think they're very distracted. So when you want to engage with them, it's gonna take more than you just trying to talk to them.
Right.
Unfortunately, they're gonna be distracted because
Mhm.
social media, their phones. They're thinking about whatever it is they're thinking about. Nowadays, um, they can find an answer. They have a question. They can just look it up. So their mind is thinking. You know.
They're also so afraid to like say the wrong thing, much like you were growing up, right? Let me just say anything. So I think a lot of kiddos are also internalizing, imploding rather than, again, kind of, putting it out there. And so I think a lot of times it's that, right? They don't want to say. I mean, I have grown ass clients tell me that they either lie or they hold back because they are worried or afraid about what I'm going to think about what they're saying. So now
Yeah.
think of a kid and they're either parental figure or an adult or father. There's a lot of that going on for sure.
Yeah. So to answer some of the questions that we got or comments we got going on here, let me see. What we got.
Pretty much what you just said.
Yeah. Sorry, I was late to those. I was talking when you guys were reading. But yeah, I mean,
Wait, what did
yeah,
you say? I didn't get that.
So on IG Live, we also get questions and answers. So
Okay.
we're reading some of those. When we look away, it's because we're reading those.
On the
So
phone.
they're
Let's see.
pretty much saying stating what you just
There I
stated.
am.
Yeah.
They're backing me up. Like, yeah, I told
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Right. So yeah,
Well,
no, but I mean,
most of them are putting. It starts with being present and engaging to your kids. Which obviously, if you're a parent and you consider yourself a good real parent, you are. But there's going to be always those situations, those moments, right? So again, I'll put it as I'll put myself as an example. When I say that I wasn't allowed to say no or to not have an answer, that made me think ahead and okay, for the next time, I'm gonna answer the question.
Cayenne ese
You know,
perro.
so yeah, I wish I could, bro, but that one's the neighbors. Um, how can we without our kids being afraid of us? Like maybe at times we were afraid of our dads or moms. You know,
A lot of times.
uh,
Still.
how do we again balance that? How do we balance that? If you are engaged and if you are doing this, is it just a matter of just keep on going and doing what you're doing,
You got to start with
or
yourself, I think.
are there other practices?
Yeah, I think that you got to start with yourself too, right? Like, are you giving yourself a space? Like, are you asking yourself questions? Are you able to answer? Are you like, how are you responding to your own uh,
Hmm.
whatever obstacles or things like that? That way, when you face your child or a child and they're faced with an obstacle, how are you then responding to that um, kiddo? I think
Right.
yeah, for boys it's so hard, like because again, they're not. Like for women, it's like or girls, right? It's we tend to be softer. We tend to be more forgiving. We tend to allow them at least to develop like emotional expression and intelligence and things like that. We think about like women gathering in the kitchen and talking and like like comadre,
Comadreando.
comadreando, like that kind of uh but boys it's not like that. And so then those boys grow up to be men, and it's kind of going back to what I was saying earlier about when I worked with kids and boys, and it was their moms coming to drop them off at therapy. It was their moms coming to um the sessions or the meetings. It's the moms that are taking them to school and to the school meetings. And like, are you going back to, oh, look at that, full circle time. Are
Yeah.
you putting in time with your
What? Are you
kids?
telling me that the topics kind of correlate?
Right? But yeah, are you taking the time to get to know your kid? Right? Spend time with him and kind of be engaged and be involved in their lives.
Yeah. So I think this is a great time to segue to the next portion of this is time, right? Like
You're
Jess said,
welcome.
are we taking the time? No, it's perfect. Like I said, we go like this and we go like that, and sometimes we'll make it here, sometimes we'll make it there. Sometimes we won't even make it to this topic that we had. But anyway, yeah. So like she said, time. How are we dedicating time to our kids? How are we spending our time? How are we putting time where you want to put it? And if you haven't been or you don't think you can, like, what can you do? But I think we can start there. Are you taking the time to get to know your kids? I know automatic answer is yes, right? Yeah, I know they like this, I know they like that. But maybe deeper conversations with kids, would that be, I don't know, would that be more correct or more on what you were trying to ask, Jess?
um Spending time with them, all the think of all the love languages, right? But like, are you spending quality time with them? And that doesn't mean playing video games with them. you know that ain't it. um are you showing a physical affection, right? I think, like, are you holding your boys? Like, are you showing them that kind of love too, because you're going to give them a sense of safety when you do that. And when you give boys or your kiddos a sense of safety by being gentle and empathetic and compassionate and understanding, then they will open up, right? Then they will talk. Are you asking them questions? Are you without like, this is how you got, like luego jumping to that kind of thing, when they come home and they tell you about how they were treated. I think that's what you were saying earlier too. So yeah, like time is energy, right?
Yep.
Also. And so and this is why I also said earlier that you got to start with yourself. If you're coming home from work and you're stressed and you're, like you're dealing with financial problems, you're mad at the wifey, like all kinds of stuff that meant, your own mental health problems or whatever's going on. And then your kid comes to you like with his emotions and his shit. Like, how are you responding in those moments, right?
Yeah, I mean, specifically with me, last week, last week was nuts for me. Because, not to complain, I don't want to complain, but I had my son daycare wasn't
What's wrong
available
with
for the week.
complaining?
I don't want to
Complain all
complain.
you want. You're in the safe zone.
So so my son's daycare wasn't available, so I had to take care of him. Um, uh, my manager at work had to step away, so I covered for her. On top of that, sometimes trying to get work done and trying to take care of your kid is hard. I would go on Monday. Monday I had both kids. Daycare were closed, so I had my 3.5 year old and my 1 year old,
That's a
and
lot.
they didn't give me the day off. And so I was trying to work, get shit done, dealing however the hell I can to deal with both of them. I'm in sales, so I'm trying to make sure I get stuff done. We ventured into real estate, so we have something that we're trying to get done over there. So I'm trying to multitask and do that, trying to do the kids, trying to do this. So it was tough. It was just a lot of things going on, and towards the middle of the week, shit, Tuesday, Wednesday, I was already like snappy, super snappy, and I just told my wife, like, and I told her a couple times, like, I'm sorry, it's just a lot of shit going on this week, like, I'm sorry, it's just a bunch of stuff. I don't mean to be snappy, I don't mean to be short. It's just I can't deal with a lot of this shit right now, and so this you kind of just go through it. But I guess trying to go back to what you were saying is I'm going through a lot of shit, and then my daughter has a tantrum. And so there's a I always do a little like before I sorry saying even with my wife, right? She says something that just hits me. I just before I say something or do something that I'm gonna regret, let me just take a
Breathe,
quick deep
yeah.
breath, and
Take 5.
yeah, something. And I'm just like, fuck. So I just found myself breathing a lot, and so
That's good.
and
Glad
so
you're breathing for it.
yeah, God, it was so hard. But I did realize that I was very short with my daughter. And my wife told me like think about the way you're talking to her, and I'm like, fuck, well, I didn't mean to. It's just I'm trying to get shit done, and the water's cold, but she says it's hot, and she's not touching it. I told her to touch the water, but I'm just like I'm trying to like justify my snappiness to a 3-year-old, and now that I'm past that, right? It's just like, fuck, dude, like that was rough. That was a rough week. Thankfully, I did go to my mom's like a couple days, so it did help. I don't want to sit here and act like I didn't get any help or nobody offered to help or whatever, but like if I wouldn't have had that, like it would have been rough. It would have been mega rough. And so yeah, yeah, finding the time and just being able to kind of give them quality time and not taking the time to connect with them in a positive way, regardless of how shitty your day's going or how stressed you are. Like, it's not their fault. And yeah, so that's that. I mean, that was a struggle for me last week, and that was like, whew, whew. I mean, I don't know how. I'm about you, Chris. I don't know if you've had those days where you're just dealing with a lot of stuff, and then your kids, no say.
That's life, right? That's every day. I think like, and I don't want to digress too much, but like, this is why I think about children are supposed to be raised in communities, you know? There's just like no way that one parent or two, even both working, like doing caregiving, taking care of the house, business, like that's a lot for two people.
Yeah.
Like, like my grandma lived with us growing up, and so that's such a blessing, such a privilege. Also probably very stressful having your in-law working living in your house,
Yeah.
right? Can you imagine that?
That's
But like, I
a
mean,
different conversation right there.
free daycare, whereas now, like, I mean, my brother has like a 3.5-year-old. She's gonna be 4 in September. My little goddaughter, super cute. And they have a boy on the way.
Nice.
But it's like, how much is daycare, school,
Not
like
cheap.
nanny, like all that? It's like it's expensive, and both of them work, so it's hard. It's hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thankfully both of us work because it's nuts, and it is funny because like, our daycare person, I forgot it wasn't even that long ago, but my wife came home. She's like, "Did you see they bought a Tesla?" I was like, "You mean we bought him a Tesla?" Like this, I'm like, it's like you're paying so much. It's like nuts. But yeah, it's not cheap. There's a lot of programs out there that that can help people that can qualify for them. We are waiting and anticipating kindergarten because that means we don't have to pay for kindergarten unless we decide to go private, which we're like.
By the way, Freud, going back to what you were saying about just having a rough day and having those moments of kind of outburst, maybe your own outburst, right? Give yourself grace. Truthfully, like like I'm saying, you're going through a lot, and no parent gets a blueprint of how to do it right. Although there are a lot of books and resources, guys, so please use them. But I think and this is like definitely coming from my clinical perspective, but like repair is so important, not just for human beings but for children. So if you do have those moments where you lost it and whatever, said something, te arrepientes, and you're feeling all kind of remorse and shit like that, like you talk to your kiddos, right? Apologize, hold yourself accountable, like show vulnerability too, right? Like I feel ashamed, like I feel sad, I feel hurt that I did that I behaved that way. That's not okay. And here's a better way, right? How I should have managed, and how did you feel about that when I did that? And then give them the space to kind of share with you how they experienced you.
Yes. I think the wording is not going to be the same.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
Well, like the reason I'm saying the times that I kind of I don't want to say lost it because I didn't like full on yell at my daughter, but it was a difficult moment, and maybe I raised my voice and I was very short,
right.
And then she's like, hey, "Mommy," she's like, she didn't want to be with me, and so here comes mom to the rescue, or whatever, right? It did go back, and I'm working on the whole trying to apologize to my daughter if we raise our voice, explain to her that we do love her, and we say or do things because we want to keep them safe, and blah blah blah. We get into that conversation. I think maybe giving them an opportunity to kind of respond is maybe something that I could probably work on, and I think that would tie in with what Chris was saying about our kids not saying, "I don't know." Like giving them an opportunity to kind of tell us how they're feeling, and reassuring them like it's okay. If you're mad, you're mad. It's okay. You can be mad. Tell me how you're feeling, and it's okay. And I'm here to listen. And I'm sorry I behaved the way, and that's not the way I should behave. How are you feeling? What do you think? And giving them the chance. And I think maybe if we do that more often, again, easier said than done. If we're able to do that more often, then maybe we can break that whole indifference or distractfulness that we're getting from kids nowadays. I've said this once and I've said it again and I'll say it all the time, but our generation, I think, is the inflection point of like the old way of doing things and like the new way of doing things, right? We have parents that want to do things differently but didn't have access to things, and parents that want to do different things and they're doing it, right? And so different doesn't necessarily mean that the way that things were done before was bad. It's just there's always room for improvement for whatever way you're doing things, in my opinion. So, yeah. So that was my experience. Chris, how have you been giving time to your kids?
Well, um, obviously, it's a little bit more difficult for me, right?
Of course.
I've always told you I have a certain amount of time, and with that certain amount of time, it's more of a what they want to do, and obviously, there always comes more than anything in the car. And this is why I brought up the fact that I don't like it when they say the I don't know things, is because I am very vocal with my kids. I do ask a lot of questions. I give them space to be able to ask those questions as well, and I always let them know how important it is to be able to ask questions, right? Uh, because it just is, it just is. They're always going to be. We're always wondering what anything, and we tend to be preguntones. So instead of being that kid of being shy all the time and being scared to ask questions, I push them. I push them a lot. Some people see it as, you're lazy because you don't want to go and do it yourself, or because you don't want to ask yourself, or whatever it is. Wherever we are at, or if we're in the restaurant, or if they actually have a question for the server or whatever, I tell them, "Oh, they're right there, ask them." Yes, it took a little while for them to get used to it, but I kept on pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. So with those situations, it created a safe space for them, so that we don't have those moments of me blowing up on them, or getting frustrated for something that they did or didn't do, because
Yeah.
I know that I made the time to cover to try to cover at least everything that I know with them, and that's because of the fact that I am not with them 24/7.
I was just gonna ask you, Chris, if you don't mind me. How many kids do you have? How old are they? Like,
I have two, 9 and 13.
okay, 13 is a tough age.
So that's why we in
We
Freud's
can turn this
situations
into
are
a session if we need to. It's okay.
No, I'm gonna charge you for that.
Freud's and our situations are very different. He's going through baby stuff, which I went through that, 10 years ago.
Hmm.
So very, very different. That's why what sometimes to me what Freud goes through, I'm like, ay, pobrecito, such a baby crying for just two, you know. When like for example, I put my brother in a situation, he has five, that's when you're like, oh shit, now I really gotta stress out about five. But obviously every situation is different, every person is different, everybody deals it completely different. And I guess whatever method you use and it works, not to say that it's correct, but I mean, if it works for you, it works for you.
Yeah. Let me see. Anybody posting any questions on the gram?
Not questions, more like just comments.
Commentary, huh?
Come on, bro, Santel.
Your kids, it's cool that my kids order their own food when the server comes. They would
Mm-hmm.
like me to do it for them, but I quickly taught them how to do it themselves. That's
So
good though.
that's exactly what I did, because I remember my dad did it to me as well, And at first, I thought it was embarrassing. We grew up with being the interpreters of our parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, dile
Mm-hmm.
que quiero esto y esto. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember at times not knowing, obviously, how embarrassing it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not the fact
Hashtag
that my dad
anxiety.
couldn't, not the fact that my dad couldn't speak English, or at least correctly, but the fact that I was the one
Having to speak.
ordering.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, I was a kid. I didn't know the reason. I didn't know that my dad was embarrassed at the time, or that it was just a lot easier and quicker for me to order or for me to call a certain place or whatever.
See, the funny thing is, I had a different experience. I don't remember. I don't remember if it was. I don't think it was my parents, but
Yeah.
um, I had a situation where I I was like, all right, I know what I want. I can order it. And then somebody hit me with, vas a pagar tú? You know,
Well,
I was like,
that's
oh
that's when
shit.
you're
Oh no, pero okay.
you're stepping over boundaries.
Yeah. But
Oh,
as a kid, like they're asking everybody what they want, and then
right.
like they looked at me, and I was like, gonna order. Oh, vas a pagar tú? I was like, oh shit, yeah, yeah, I guess
Yeah.
not. Whatever. You know.
And again,
Yeah,
it's just
yeah. See, my brother
everyone.
knows. They my because my dad taught us the same thing. He would show us how to order your own food, and they asked my brother, hey, sir, muchacho, niño, chavalo, how would you like your hamburger cooked? And he said, good. He
Well,
didn't say cooked. You didn't say cooked, fool. You said good. He
you
said
want it
good,
perfectly good.
good. And so then there's a lesson, right? It's you have to tell them if you want it, medium, bleeding,
Yeah,
or
but at that
alive.
age, you don't know nothing about well done,
No, but
medium,
you
none
don't.
of that shit.
Pero ándale, you want to order? Entrale.
It's
So,
not, but the next time he already knew.
Simon.
So we always got to be at that point where it's going to be a learning experience,
Yeah.
right? There's going to be that lesson. One day you're going to fall, now you know how to get up.
Yeah.
One day you're going to get a flat, either you learn how to do it, replace it yourself, or if you have a chance of having AAA or that type of insurance for them to do it for you, then they do it for you.
So, let me take this opportunity real quick and ask the people that we have out there in Instagram world. Looks like we have about 10 people, 8 to 10 people. We have Jessica here with us today. She's an expert in her field. She is very, 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 very knowledgeable about everything that we've been talking about. What kind of questions would you guys have to pick her brain a little bit? Um, this is free
Free session
free
brought to you by Que
session.
That ain't it.
She will receive a package of beverages of her choice soon, so we'll take care of her. No, I'll take care of her. But yeah, like I don't know, like if you were
You want to know if you have
yeah,
kids.
do you have kids?
And
Me?
I think about what you said earlier to know. Yeah. She brought up her niece and soon to come
Yeah.
nephew.
No, I
So the
don't.
answer is no,
No
Santiago.
kids. All right, that was a quick one, bro. Add a way to not be a salesman and ask all these closed-ended questions.
Right?
No. I worked with as I've worked with most of my experience, like I said before, has been with working with kids. So I've worked in um, outpatient therapy with them, and I worked at inpatient psych units. So when kiddos would get hospitalized for mental health crisis, so I've worked with them there. Um, and then I've worked at as a medical social worker on the medical floor with kids with cancer as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I've worked with, like I said, the out of foster youth. I've worked as a youth partner. A lot of kiddos in the LGBTQI plus
So,
community, things
other
like
than
that.
your professional part, they're also asking, did you help raise a sibling in your
I'm the
family?
youngest.
So the
I have an
answer is
older I have an older brother, yes. And my parents were together. Um, what's really I digress, but I do want to share this story for you because I was talking about you today, so I thought that was such a magical thing. I was talking to a client of mine who is expecting. We're talking about names, and
Oh yeah.
my sister-in-law is pregnant. She's having a boy, and their middle name, my future nephew's middle name is going to be Froilan, because that was the name of my father. My dad passed away, and
Oh man, I
and
didn't know
my
that.
father's dad, so my paternal grandfather, was also Froilan. So when I was sharing that story today to my client. I'm like, it's a trip. Like, I met a friend, a fraternity brother, like that. His
Crazy.
name's Troy. Yeah. So I was talking about you today, and then this whole conversation happened. Now I'm here. So anyway, side note.
Yeah, I forgot to bring that up too. I feel like every time we talk, like, oh my god, your name. I know that name because
Yeah, it's special.
So, my friend, our friend Joey is asking, what does she do for work again?
She just said it.
I'm a therapist now. I'm a therapist. I'm at a group private practice, and I only work with adults now and couples. Um, yeah, used to work
Couples.
with
That's a good
families
one.
and
We'll
kids.
have to take your information and put it on one of our
Yeah, for
resources so
sure.
people can hit you up.
We're all on the website, so it
Relationship,
allows us
marriage
to,
advice, that kind of thing.
you
Yeah,
know.
trauma. My specialty is trauma.
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna say earlier. I think a lot of kids have anxiety nowadays, and I
Yes,
think
which is
that's
crazy.
frequently what keeps them from like speaking up. And their social networks are all like online, and I don't know, the way that kiddos are communicating
So
nowadays. These generations, like a whole thing, a whole different
how about
thing.
how about anxiety with adults that didn't know they had it?
What's the question? Like, how about it? You mean? What do you mean by that?
Right. Adults that didn't know that they had anxiety.
Yeah, I think a lot of our parents have like mental health issues, right? Like the
No, I mean saying like adults like people our age, right? So
a lot of
uh
people, yeah.
and include I guess you can include our parents. So obviously we were taught, right? And now again I put myself as an example a lot. For me, anxiety, not so much growing up, but as a younger adult, um to me it was like it meant that you were weak, right?
Mm,
And that's coming obviously from our culture and then coming from our working background, right? So even in our working background, you had to be tough because you had to fight for your dollar. You had to make sure that you were technically stronger minded than the customer in order to close them and so whatnot. But I always felt, oh well, you're weak minded, you're just a weak person. You're just a weak person. And it was to a point where I understood it as, oh, you're just a weak person. Your brain is not wired, right, and you just can't handle these situations. Uh, Not knowing that later in life, obviously, major trauma would come and situations would come and at the same time and crash and I myself going through panic attacks and
mm,
feeling things that I've never felt before, not understanding them.
mhm.
And obviously now I'm a firm believer in how painful it is and how frustrating these situations are.
Yeah,
And especially us not being educated as, first of all, Latinos, and then second of all, being Latino fathers, Latino parents. Uh, this was never brought up in any conversation with our parents or even any family members whatsoever, and especially with friends. I had never spoken about anything like that with Freud at all. Because obviously it was something that we never had gone through, and he's a testament to what I'm saying is uh, thinking that we're strong minded, but it's because we've never gone through it, we've never experienced it.
We're just shielded.
yeah,
Right. Trying to shield something that we were already feeling, but didn't know what it was. Didn't know how to explain it, or even didn't know what that feeling meant.
yeah. Absolutely. We don't have the language for it. I think a lot of people, to your point, right? A lot of adults that I see, they don't have the language to share. And also, there's a lot of misconceptions about what anxiety is and what depression is, right? Depression is not just like sitting and crying in your bed and not being able to get up, and it shows up different for men and women. For men, it shows up like um, unhappiness with, and this is by the book, essentially like unhappiness with their job, increase in substance abuse, right? Alcoholism, and that's anger, irritability. One of the, I think, main emotions that we allow men to express is anger, right? We don't allow them to express nervousness, definitely not grief. And so then you experience fear, and you have to suppress it because you're weak, right? And then you're having panic attacks and not understanding. I think to your point of like, kids saying, I don't know, I don't know. I remember I had this 15-year-old boy, um, really gnarly story, but he would sit there, and it was a struggle with him to get him to open up. And he would say a lot, I don't know, I don't know. But you'd see his hands sweating,
Right.
right? Like constantly like wiping his like hands on his or like his mouth would even like be shaking. You could just see the
Yeah, he
physiological
wanted to say it, but he just couldn't.
feelings,
Right.
emotions, right? Like you're in a state of like fight or flight, or you're in that, like healing happens in the body, and so it's like, oh yeah, that's why you don't know, right? It's a different brain, part of your brain functioning right now. Let's calm the body down, breathe, like let's show you how to ground yourself before we can even begin to ask you how to speak or how to express. But to I mean, Freud started this way, right? Like, no me gusta llorar,
It,
like, I
it's
mean,
always there.
it's the messaging that we send, the message that we perpetuate, the beliefs that we have about mental health, about our emotions. We see them as a weakness when it's a total opposite. When you don't have, I mean, think about it logically. When you don't have like an ability to like feel something, know something, and then control it, it becomes your Achilles heel, right? It becomes your weakness because you don't know it. You don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
It's literally the opposite. It's versus when you have the ability to express it, you know what it feels like, you can tolerate it in your body, you can cope with it, you can um, feel it and let it out. Like that's having strength, right? That means that that's a strong point, right? um, I can manage them, I can feel them, I can, all that. And it's the complete opposite, the way that we kind of frame it, and for ourselves, even
Yes.
especially for ourselves, our internal voice too.
So Jess, I'm gonna pose this. I'm gonna pose this. I'm gonna pose this question to you because I'm sure in your field, um, uh, dealing with children, you know, dealing with families or families, to put it that way. Um, how would you answer to someone saying, um, well, you don't have any children, so how would you understand that? I can't
Not
talk to them.
necessarily
No,
the
no, no,
question
no.
is
I'm
like
asking. No, I'm asking it like that.
you
I'm
don't
asking it like that.
understand what I'm going through,
Yeah,
or
you
you
don't
didn't
understand
grow
what
up
I'm
how I
going through.
grew up.
Yeah,
All that, like, and I'll take it back to something that's relatable to Freud and I, in sales, right? Um, we were always taught, or training is to be empathetic with customers, right? So whenever a customer would tell us, "Oh, this, and this," the best answer that they would tell us to say is, "I understand. I understand. I understand. I understand. I understand what you're going through." And I remember certain situations where we had customers, with even with Freud. Say Freud was dealing with customers, and I was visualizing his sale or the way he was treating the customer. I would hear him say, "I understand what you're going through," but then the customer would, or say in your case, the patient would say, "Well, no, you don't understand. You don't understand because you're not going through what I'm going through. You don't have this gigantic bill on your part. All you do is sell the product, lock up, and go home. Versus I gotta go and look at this bill and see how I'm going to deal with it." So how as a doctor, technically, how and I think it'll be good for us parents having that convincing part in that conversation to allow them to want to open up, and two, for them to believe what we're saying is true?
Hmm. That's a great question, right? I think that there's a two piece, and you already kind of said one of them. Like, I definitely don't understand your experience, right? Because I'm not you. I'm not a male. I'm not, I don't have children, and or when it's anybody else, right? When I'm speaking to the Black community or the trans community, things like that, like I don't understand, but I can empathize with, and I can be compassionate, right? And I can hold space for you, and I
Right.
can support you in your process and your self understanding. So I think that's part of it. I don't necessarily need to be in your shoes to do that,
Yeah.
right? So that's first and foremost. And also, I'm not trying to tell you what to do, right? So I try to minimize the hierarchy here. Yes, I have a certain level of education and training and expertise, but that doesn't make me know the answers for you or what's going to be best for you, right? That's not my job.
Do
This is
most
you.
patients feel like you're telling them what to do, or
I
do
don't
they go
Most of them
then
want me to tell
thinking,
them what to do,
right?
to be honest.
Do they
Most
go
of them come in and
thinking
they're like, tell me, and they get
they
frustrated if I don't
right?
give them like, and I'm more, my style is definitely more straightforward, and I'm gonna be like, look, can't tell you what to do. I'm gonna highly encourage you to do this.
Right.
The other piece I want to say, and I'm gonna kind of steal a little bit from that podcast that I was telling you guys about, the man and now, because it's two males on it and one woman. And the Black male that's in the podcast asks the white woman, like, what gives you a right to talk about masculinity or manhood, right, as a woman? And she gives like the most brilliant answers. She says the same right that gives you as a Black male to talk about whiteness, right? It's that as the oppressed, or as like being in the margins of a demographic of a community, you have a wider, not like perspective, right? And so as a woman, like, I understand masculinity and manhood because I'm the oppressed in that particular dynamic, right?
Right.
You add an intersectionality, right? The more your identity stands in a more intersectional place, then you have more visions, right? If
More
you have a
perspective on.
disability, if you have this, if you have that, your perspective is larger. Who has the least amount of perspective? A white, hetero, able bodied, billion, white man, like tunnel vision, can't see shit, right? So I don't have to have children, but I am a daughter and I am a woman, and I've experienced parents, and I've experienced fathers, right? Or so I think that also gives me, it's my lens, it's the position of where I'm viewing the world that kind of allows me to see things as, if that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense because and I'm asking just to be devil's advocate,
No, yeah, of course.
but
Appreciate the question. It's a good question.
I think it's good to know because there may be parents out there that would say, what would she doesn't know my experience. She doesn't have the same experience that I do, so why should I pay
It's
attention or listen?
impossible for her to have
The same,
anybody's
yeah,
experience because we're
or
all different.
yeah, why should
It-
I
it-
listen to that? So
it's all a
so
generalization, and like it's like she just said, her experiences and the culture in her family and neighbors and friends
Simon.
and any of that, and obviously in her studies allows her to give an opinion
Mm-hmm.
because more than anything, in therapy, you guys give opinions, and it's up to the patient if they want to take it or not, right? Or if they want to continue practicing whatever it is you guys might be suggesting.
Yeah,
So,
but I think at the same time it answers the question of how does your experience match with mine. It's not directly the same experience, but you're on the other spectrum of it. You're on the spectrum of that experience because you're on the other end of it, and you see it from that end, and you're giving your point of view, and your empathy comes from a different place, but it's on the same line, right? And so I think that really, I mean, geez, that's like the most honest answer you can give. Like, yeah, I'm not a dad. I don't have kids, but I'm a daughter and I have a father. so I can give you that point of view and that experience and what could have made that experience better for me. Maybe this could have made this better experience for you and your kids. You're right. And so yeah, hell yeah, 100%. Um, uh, yeah. I mean, I think that answers my question 1,000%. So thank you for taking it with grace.
Yeah, of course.
Um, anything else that you have? Because I think we're starting to get towards the very end of it. I don't want to keep
Yeah.
you up too late, Jess. I know you
Yes.
probably got
My
work
bedtime.
tomorrow. Chris, guys on the chat, any questions or anything else that you'd like to ask?
I'm good. She pretty much answered. As far as both, the parent part and us either at one point having to go through some therapy or actually thinking about going to therapy and how easy it is uh, to actually do it, right? Because
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think we're all victims, or we can all be guilty of saying, "Well, I don't believe in it" at one point,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
I don't. It's not gonna work for me because, like you just said, they don't know what I'm talking about. They don't know what I'm feeling. They don't know what I went through. They don't know anything. How's somebody gonna tell me? A stranger gonna tell me
What to
how to
do?
fix myself
Yeah.
Yeah,
or
you know
or
how I
how
see that
to
too, and I
anything.
think that it's a fear of judgment, right? It's a
Yes.
fear of it really ultimately, and I think when I see my clients come in there, this is why it's like, oh, it's about really removing those layers and those walls, and you know, looking at your belief systems. I know what belief systems they're coming into, like or in with, and so yeah, I
Yeah.
think that I addressed that right away. Just I guess lastly, before I go, 'cause I'm gonna peace out, but
No, we're all gonna cut it down
I'm
right now. You're good.
super thankful. Thank you so much for letting me be part of this. And I am so, so proud of you, Froy, and both of you. It was really great meeting you, Chris. Like I said earlier, like I think this is amazing, like to create spaces like this to just have dialogue and conversations. That's where it starts, bottom line. And that's
Yeah.
what therapy is, right? Like what are you doing? You're talking. Like you're talking through things and you don't have to have an expert necessarily, but just talking to you, men talking to other men. Like, awesome. Yes, please do more of it.
More,
I can't tell you what to do, but I highly encourage men to talk to other men about hard things and get brave and courage. It really takes a lot of courage, um, and to be brave to have those conversations. So yeah,
Thank
props.
you. Thank you for joining us, Jess. I know it was very last minute, and
No, super last minute,
uh,
but thank you. I'm glad I'm here.
I'm not sure if you thought it was gonna be like just a quick phone call.
Hey
um,
man, I go with the
uh,
flow. So
you're
cool.
you're gonna be Spotify famous and
and,
YouTube famous
and these
now.
are actually short calls that we're doing now. We used to do up to 2.5 hours before,
Yeah.
so yeah. But
So.
no, the same thing that what Pro said. I do appreciate it. Uh, I kept on trying to have other people as guests too, and everybody's very shy, right?
Hmm.
And again, that's another thing with me is that there's nothing to be shy about, right? Because you're basically talking to your screen and to a couple other people in front of you. But this is natural for Freud and I to talk to other people, especially strangers, and that's the only way I think that it's very healthy to sometimes spark a conversation. When I was into sales, the best conversations I had was with older people, right? And especially older people, all they need is someone to listen. They have so many stories,
Mhm.
so much to talk about that one day is not enough. And this is what we try to offer here is for any of our listeners or anybody that just clicks on our website or pages or anything is a way to speak about whatever. You want to talk about sports, we talk about sports. You want to talk about kids? We talk about kids, parenthood, fishing, whatever it is. We talk about. You want to talk about girls? We talk about girls.
That's how
Um,
knowledge is passed down in our culture, right? Through
you
story.
know, we've gotten to know a few professionals, and we also have a few people that we could recommend, and hopefully that could be what that could be you. in the future,
Mhm.
and so that we could recommend ourselves to it, and obviously some of our listeners.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We'll keep in touch, definitely. Once you are up and running, definitely send me your information and we'll share it. We'll share it on our network.
Yeah.
And I think one of our aims is to make sure that we make mental health help available to us in a way that it's for the guys, right? It's for the guys. I know it's not easy, and we're not gonna judge you for it because we do it ourselves. I've done therapy. Chris has done therapy, and it's worked great. So,
Right.
uh,
Yay.
thank you, everybody who's joined us. You guys are great. Always love the questions, the comments. Chris, make sure you send your neighbor a thank you for the dog. Always making a visit here on our calls. But thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Jess and Chris. I don't know if you got any parting words other than thank you.
No. Again, thank you, everybody. Our listeners are always with the creative questions and comments. Appreciate it, and I appreciate Jess for joining us tonight,
Cool.
and clearing up a lot of things that maybe we had a few questions on.
Beautiful. All right, guys. Make sure you guys follow us on Instagram, Que Padre Fatherhood Network. Go on Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast. Look up Que Padre Podcast. And check us out on YouTube. We have this whole video up. It should be available no later than tomorrow morning. But thank you, everybody. And you guys have a good night.
Yeah. Have a good night.